Don't forget, on the 18th of June, we'll be marking the 80th birthday of Paul McCartney with a special Word in Your Park in Holland Park. Some guests announced, more being announced all the time. Get your tickets below.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
So, welcome to another Word in Your Attic and to an old pal of ours from our days when we used to present programmes on VH1, a TV producer, man about town, and a rock and roll Hall of Fame committee member, the great Mike Kaufman. Mike, it's lovely to see you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and where are you?
I'm in leafy Southfields, which is sort of near Wimbledon way. Very near Wimbledon Common, where the Wombles are.
Oh, yes.
We ought to add that Mike is also the person who, if he's not in the place, the Rolling Stones simply will not go on stage, will they? It's as simple as that.
That was the
no, I'm sorry.
But that's possibly because they've seen him. I don't know if you remember this day, but Mike's 40th birthday party, a Stones tribute band took to the stage, and the front man was Mike Appleton. Mike Kaufman, sorry.
All right.
Well, all right.
Absolutely.
No, Nick didn't have to worry, I don't think.
No, not at all.
I want to ask you, before we go any further, Mike, have you noticed these posters on the tube that are advertising a strange group playing in Hyde Park in July called Stones? Not the Stones, not the Rolling Stones, Stones. What's your explanation for that then, my lad?
I haven't been party to any such discussion. I suspect it's the way things are, isn't it? Everything that you rebrand stuff, and there we are. You
can't rebrand the Rolling Stones, for goodness
sake. Does it work calling the Rolling Stones Stones? It's not even the Stones.
Absolutely,
it's Stones.
No, I think it misses the. I mean, for a while they called when I think it was when they moved from Sony to EMI or something, it became Rolling Stones rather than the Rolling Stones.
Oh, really?
Oh, okay.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
No, I
think that's maybe why. But you don't say Stone. I'm going to see Stones in Hyde Park.
Absolutely, of course you don't. You don't know.
But they're 60 years old this year, so I suppose they can do what they want.
Well, accept that. Sorry, I'm going to go on about this. The key thing to the Rolling Stones' career is it's whenever they made that live album in Madison Square Garden, Get EIRs Out, whoever introduced them, Sam Cutler, whoever it was, say, ladies and gentlemen, the greatest rock and roll band in the world, the Rolling Stones. Yeah. And they were the first group to have a form of the way that they were announced. And that became a hugely important part of their brand and has been ever since. So you can't muck about with that at all, it seems to me. What do you think?
I think that maybe someone was trying to be contemporary in some shape or form.
Dear, well, that's
we're asking you to defend them, which is very hard.
Anyway, that's enough of that. Okay.
I know.
So what we normally do, Mike, when we start these chats is we ask people if they can remember what was the record-playing machinery in your home when you were a child. Can you remember?
Yes, I can. Well, the first record player was obviously my parents' house in Caterham in Surrey, which is also the place where Johnny Moped came from. So it's the ground zero of the music business, obviously. And we had a little house and a little radiogram, I seem to remember.
Right.
And it was one of those
with carved wooden legs, one of those.
Yeah, when we moved a few years later, like 68, we had like a coffin-shaped teak kind of G-plan radiogram, which the speakers are further apart, so stereo was a thing. But the first one, I think, was mono with a big speaker. But Uncle Shad next door, who was a bit more of a muso than my parents, who weren't that interested, he had speakers up in the ceiling, I remember, and a turntable with little weights on. And that was my introduction. I thought, when I grow up, I want a turntable with weights on. So,
right.
Yeah.
My inspiration.
So what records did they have? Yeah, what was playing?
Oh, God. Well, not much. I mean, before I was born, it was a bit of Mantovani and Joe Loss.
Right.
And it was that kind of stuff. Really, it was all kind of soundtracks, the Sound of Music soundtrack.
Absolutely. South Pacific, probably more like, actually.
Yeah, and then some sort of obscure orchestra. Well, all the main stuff, Beethoven, Mozart, that was all there as well. But mainly, I seem to remember hearing, my mum used to like Joe Loss, and Mantovani and all that stuff. until my sister and I corrupted her and got into a Queen, but that's a whole other thing.
Oh, that's good. No Beatles? That didn't...
well, until I came along, no. But then when I came along, quite early on, I went to see A Hard Day's Night with my grandmother in Malden, Essex. So I was quite early on the Beatles.
With your grandmother. I went with my granny to see the Beatles.
But then how old would your granny have been? Probably, I don't know.
Younger than us.
Yeah, exactly. 40 or something. You know.
Yeah, 40, 30 years younger than the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
40 years younger than Rolling Stones. Yeah, but she seemed quite old at the time. And we went to see A Hard Day's Night. And we were, demographically, we were on the young and old side at the same time. It was the young people, but they weren't as young as me. I was the only kid there, I think.
Right.
And then my grandmother's also important because my first record player I had was I saw in a shop in Malden, Essex, where I was staying with them, and it was a Russian-made little tiny turntable in like a little case. And I've got the case, so it's got a Black & Decker drill in it now, but it hasn't got a record player. But it's a little sort of plastic case. You open it up, and this really sort of clunky Russian thing would play records.
So that was in case you wanted to take it to the beach or to a barbecue.
Yes, but then it was a mains one, so it's somewhat limited.
Yes, just a bit.
It's not very portable, is it, really?
It wasn't a dance set that people had. It was like a Russian...
Well, there was an amazing invention. Philips invented a little battery-operated record player. Do you remember those? You click back the arm.
Well, you slip them in, and they scratch the hell out of them.
And the case kind of separated into two stereo speakers. It was absolutely amazing. It's revolutionary. You go and play records.
The Russian version, I suspect.
Yeah, I think so. Can you remember the first single you ever bought?
Well, yes. And again, I think I went up to the local hardware store, actually with my grandmother. It wasn't like she was around the whole time, but she was around in my Beatles years. And I went and I found the actual single, where it's an EP.
Oh, well, there you go.
All this, which, I mean,
every home should have
Hang
one.
on a second. Hold on a second.
I have mine by the desk the whole time.
It's such a great iconic.
It's just the greatest sleeve. Dave met the photographer in the island of Guernsey about 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah, the girl who took that picture.
Dave will know where that is, probably.
Well, that was taken at an old bomb site near King's Cross, I think.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah. Okay.
I think Alex, you do. I think we'll do your.
Should we do the picture?
Do your screen grab now. So all three of us. Alex, can you do that?
Okay, on it, guys. 3, 2, 1. Beautiful.
That's great.
It's Beatles
now. We've kind of told the story, haven't we? Really? I mean,
yeah. No, Dave, tell the story briefly of meeting. You met the photographer, didn't you, in at a festival in Guernsey?
She died about a year ago, and I was in. This is about 4 or 5 years ago. I was at a literary speaking at a literary festival in Guernsey.
Yeah,
and I was signing books or whatever, and this lady, sort of grey-haired lady, very rather chic, but elderly. She approached me and she had a little business card which said, what's her name? Fiona, I can't remember her second name. And it had a reproduction of this famous picture on it. And she told me the story about how she'd been the kind of young photographer on teen magazines and fabulous and so forth in the 60s. And she'd got to do that, which she shot somewhere near Euston Station. Yeah. On sort of a bomb site or something, because she said they came from the north and therefore I felt we needed something a bit gritty,
a bit rough.
Yeah. And of course that is genuinely, it's an overused word, but it's genuinely an iconic photograph.
An incredible picture.
Absolutely extraordinary picture.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we bought Long Tall Sally at the same time. I can't find that cover, but again, that's another EP.
Has he got that, Mark's got?
Do you mean Long Tall Sally?
Yeah.
Sorry, I have Beatles EPs by the computer just because there are moments in the day when you just need a little bit of cheering up.
Nothing else.
Those covers and you think fantastic. Great.
So somebody animated this one so that they jump up and down, and somebody sent me the animation once. It's very pleasing.
Oh, really?
That's good.
Right. So so it's Beatles first for you, not the Rolling Stones.
Are those Beatles Russian dolls you have behind you?
Yeah, well, that's quite a long story.
Oh, no, tell her later.
It was very much, the Beatles were in that era, you know, like when I was about 4, early 60s, they were huge and they were on Ready, Steady, Go. I remember seeing them there. And they were on the radio the whole time. We had pirate radio back then. My dad listened to something with a number in. I listened to Radio London on this little tiny red thing. And there was music in the house the whole time. And it was pop music. And pop music was largely the Beatles back then. And Cliff Richard was also, and my mother tells me that, and this is a bit like a Derek and Clive sketch, but I wrote to Cliff Richard and the Beatles to come and play in our garden. And they didn't reply. And as a Derek and Clive sketch goes, did you put a stamp on it? I did, but it was a Mickey Mouse stamp. So I'm not sure I even got to them. But Cliff Richard was there as well, you know, in the early days.
That's brilliant.
I wasn't quite as cool as perhaps just the Beatles. And then the Stones came a bit later when I can remember hearing Satisfaction in my dad's Ford Zodiac in the back seat. And I thought, you know, my destiny is assigned now. I just heard that guitar and it was just like, you know, who are these people, you know? Yeah. And I stuck with the Beatles. I mean, you never leave the Beatles, but the Stones, they, at that point, around the Satisfaction period, was when I started loving them.
So did you see them on Ready, Steady, Go and so forth? You must have.
Yes. And of course, then you had to watch it. There was no, you know, video or anything like that.
So who did you want to be in the Rolling Stones?
Oh, well, apart from the fact I like to play guitar, but I don't think I could keep up with Keith. I at that age probably wanted to be Mick, I would think.
Right, okay.
A bit like your old college friend Tony Blair. You know,
yes, he did too.
You know, but it's hard work being Mick. I mean, now I think, oh no, you know,
it's too much running. Too much running about. He never ran and didn't run far in the 60s.
No, and now
he now has stages that are 3/4 of a mile wide, and you have to keep going, making sure the people over there are all right. Must be knackering.
Yeah, he's like an athlete. I mean, remember they had that sort of thing on the TV where sports people competed with other sports people. Yeah, always the racing drivers that won. I think if they did the same with pop stars, Mick Jagger would win. Clearly,
I'm sure he would.
He's the fittest.
So
I love that. And Ready, Steady, Go, it wasn't just them. I can remember Dave Clark 5 on there. Who else was on there? Yardbirds, I think, at one point.
Oh, they would be, yeah, definitely.
And they had, you know, Gene Pitney. They had all sorts of people, you know, Americans coming over on that show as well. It was amazing. It was an amazing thing. And the Top of the Pops, of course, was big as well.
Right. So you were, where were you living at the time?
In Caterham, in Surrey.
Oh, Surrey, right.
Caterham on the Hill, actually.
Right. Where did you buy records? Can you remember?
Yeah, well, I can't remember the name, unfortunately. But there was Rignall's the Butcher on the High Street. Whether you need this kind of detail, I don't know.
No, I don't. I really.
We love it. We love electrical shops selling singles in the 1960s.
There was no clue they sold records in the window because there was Hoovers and stuff like that.
That's right. Same as ours.
There was a counter on the left. There's always had counters. I don't think there was any listening booths in this particular place. And there was on the left where there were album covers and singles, and you went and leafed through, and that's where this came from.
Yeah.
It's where the groovers hung out.
Yeah, so when I was 16, I worked in a record shop in West Croydon, Mr. Fox, and they were down the rough end of Croydon, it's fair to say. And apart from just doing records, they did gigs, and they did a lot of importing as well, Vixen import.
They did. They used to advertise their imports in the back of the NME. Am I right in thinking this? I think they did. They were one of those places.
Upstairs, they were putting out the postal stuff, and also Virgin Records were above a shoe shop. They used to take imports.
Shelley
and the
shoes.
trick was then that in America, the labels used to release stuff earlier.
Well, and also the other way around. In Britain, they released it earlier. British acts, you know, so there was a thriving trade. You didn't have that kind of universal release date that you have nowadays.
No, not at all. And the trick was getting the jump on it, you know. So Fox and Steve Mason and his brother, who was my boss back then, and went to Pinnacle after that, but they had a big business importing all this stuff in. So Bowie fans like me would get hold of the albums, you know, 10 days before their mates.
So there used to be import companies called Stage One, well, one of them. There was one called Charmdale. I can't remember. A couple of others. And these guys were broader than Broadway. I remember these people because I was working in a record shop at the West End. and they would race out to Heathrow when the consignments came in of a new Little Feat album or a Frank Zappa record or whatever. They would somehow get them through customs, and then they would literally race into the West End to see who could be the first one to park at the top of South Molton Street outside One Stop Records.
With a copy of Hot Rats, whatever.
No, it's post Hot Rats.
Yeah.
More apostrophe and things like that.
Yeah.
And then there was the HMV shop was on the same stop. And of course, it was a very delicate balance ordering the correct quantity. Because if you got 25 and you sold them really quickly, the temptation was to get another 25. Bad error. Because
the 25 people who actually wanted them have already got them now. No one else was interested. Yeah.
And the rest was we're going to wait until the UK release. But the excitement of an import copy in those days.
So were you an evangelical record shop assistant, kind of turning people onto things, or were you a kind of surly Jack Black in High Fidelity type?
Well, I was only about 16 or 17, so I was in neither camp. I was so excited to be there. Yeah. That I just soaked it all up. There was a thriving business, what they called krautrock then, and we had a lot of German imports as well. We had people come in to kind of buy all this stuff, not just can, it went deeper than that, some of it. And that was quite a learning curve. I knew nothing about that before. But the guys upstairs, who were all in their 20s and a bit sort of, and I was quite sort of rock-based with a bit of Motown and obviously the Beatles and all the stuff I grew up with. They turned me on to Weather Report and I remember Headhunters, Herbie Hancock, which I've got a copy of. That whole world opened up, and then I got into Little Feat and basically the record shop is like a treasure trove. David knows because he worked in one as well. Absolutely. You do explore other areas. It's just all there, and so it was a great experience. Because they ran the Croydon Greyhound, so I could get into gigs for nothing. But B, it was a musical education for me at that point.
Yeah, I think it's true that working in a record shop, oddly enough, does make you more liberal in your musical tastes. Yeah. Because you will be working alongside people who don't like the same things you do, but know an awful lot about something else.
Yeah.
And so you're more likely to be sold on what they like than probably in any other walk of life, really. Can you remember the first act you went to see live?
Probably at the Greyhound then, was it?
No, it was early. It was pre-Croydon. I wasn't allowed to go that far when I was that age. We went as far as the Orchid Ballroom in Purley.
I know the Orchid.
Yeah. To see Slade, supported by Status Quo, actually. So it was quite a good show.
Oh, wow.
And it was around
That's a fantastic show.
Take Me Back Home was number one the week we went, to put it in the sort of context. And Slade Alive was the album. There's a red cover. Yeah. And with Noddy Holder, with all his, power. And it was just, first gigs are amazing anyway. I went to see Alvin Stardust 2 weeks after that, and that was good as well. So,
Well, that's an amazing start. Slade.
My first gig wasn't Alvin. I can honestly say it was Slade.
So this was the kind of silver boots and the big old battered hat with broken mirrors on it, all that.
And a residency on top of the Pops. It was that period.
Fantastic.
Goodbye to Jane came after that.
Yeah. What a thrill. My God. Because they were a really incredible, I saw them exactly the same time. They were a really amazing live act, weren't they? Phenomenal.
Bloody loud. I hadn't heard anything that loud before, I don't think.
Yeah.
But seriously, were they as good as Status Quo? Because Quo were a fantastic live group in those days.
Well, it's interesting because Quo came on and all us underage people basically was sort of fascinated, but not that bothered. But round the front, there was all these people in rather smelly Afghan coats going mad. Yes. The next generation up, they were really old. They were like 17 and we were 13.
Yeah.
So they had quite a big following. It was sort of the early days before sort of Dog of Two Head would get them into my world a bit more. Right. But it was pre-that. And they also played locally around that area as well.
Right. So when did you first see the Rolling Stones?
Well, that was not until 1976.
Right.
I've got the ticket somewhere, I think.
Oh, right.
Sort of.
Has he got a scrap?
I saw them then too. Was it when they had the hydraulic flower?
Yeah.
And it started with them playing Honky Tonk Women, and the petals opened up. And there was the group. So with Ronnie Wood, of course, first 17 Ronnie Wood in the
stage. Yeah, it was his first time. Yeah, time with them.
Keith Richards, I can remember, was wearing a Bob Marley T-shirt, which I was very impressed by.
Yeah, for me, having been such a fan for all those years, it was just an amazing, Oh, here we go. Here we are. Earl's Court Arena, Thursday, May 27th, 1976. Here we are.
And how much are we paying for that ticket, Mike?
Well, it was quite expensive for them because an album was about £2, and this is £4. I remember then it's like £4,
No, an album would be more than £2 at that point. An album would be $2.99, going beyond £3 at that point.
Yeah,
because inflation. We're all about to be reacquainted with this, thanks to the current economic situation. Because the inflation of the 70s. When I used to work at a record shop, we used to have to go in nearly every weekend to change the price of everything.
Yeah,
records, so they go up that fast,
it was stickers, wasn't it? So you're forever peeling off stickers.
Absolutely. EMI would suddenly announce that everything has gone up, by 25p this week. Everybody had to reprice everything.
Bringing those days about 180, weren't they? Did it, and then you blinked an eye, and they were £5. I remember that sort of happening.
Well, yeah, I mean, they went. They must have gone to £5 by the end of the 70s.
Yeah,
surely. Yeah. So they started the 70s at £2.45, and they've finished the 70s at £5. So they more than doubled in price.
I've got a price comparison. So I saw Bob Marley around the same time, and his ticket. This is a Hammersmith Odeon.
Right.
What year would that have been?
76. It was the year after the Lyceum album. So it was
oh, wonderful. Yeah.
It was amazing, and just as amazing as the Stones, really. And that ticket was £2.50, so something of a bargain, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, tickets were cheap. As a general rule, in the 70s, tickets were cheaper than records.
Yeah, which is completely the other way around now.
Yeah, they were a lost leader to try and get you to buy the album, weren't they? Yeah.
Well, no, it wasn't like that. It's just the venues weren't as big. People didn't expect to make that much money out. People wouldn't have had that much money to spend on that.
But the whole idea of it was to promote the albums, to sell records rather than to try and make a fortune.
Yeah, I think so. And the labels used to put money into the tour.
Yeah, there's a bit of that.
Yeah,
a bit of that. But I mean, generally speaking, you didn't. The average person, you lived from week to week. You didn't live on credit cards, did you?
No, you either had the money or you were
You either had the money or you didn't. At the end of the week. When you get there, you go. When you worked in a record shop, did you get paid folding money in a brown envelope?
Yeah,
there you go. You did. It wasn't credit going into your bank account, was it?
Wasn't that the greatest feeling in the world, being paid in cash in a brown envelope? You felt so rich, didn't you?
Yeah. I worked when I was, 13 or 14. I moved to a place called Welding, which is quite near Caterham and famous because Fleetwood Mac's manager at the time lived there. So that was very exciting. And I did a paper round in his street and went in and saw the gold albums for gold singles for Albatross and everything. But when we moved there was a little factory that did spot welding. And I remember working there in like the Easter holidays, spot welding at 13 and buying Roxy Music's album at the end of the week. That's all I could afford after a week of welding.
An entire week of welding buys you one Roxy Music album.
Oh, God.
That's brilliant.
So what's the only pop record about welding?
Oh.
Do you not know this?
No, I'm thinking Flashdance at the moment. I got that image.
There you go. It's either Iroy or Uroy had a record, which is a chart record called Welding. The refrain was, "I want to get my welding done." That's the bizarre.
That's a bizarre thing to do.
70s.
You can't imagine a 1,000 strong audience going, "Yes, weld! Let's all weld." Bob Dylan welds, of course, very excitingly.
Really?
Yeah. Bob Dylan's a welder, spot welder.
It's his hobby. So what you got to show us there, Mike? What have you got?
Dig out a few of your objets d'art.
Well, this is another ticket. This is Genesis on the Lamb Lies Down. I wasn't really into Genesis because they were a bit sort of, I don't know, older generation. But the boss couldn't go to the Lamb Lies Down Broadway. This is a 74 ticket, but it was delayed to 75, and this was only £2. But I was blown away by Genesis, and I worked a lot with them subsequently. I worked with Tony Smith, who managed them. His son worked with me at Music Box, a pre-MTV channel. So I wheedled my way into that camp, and there's another discovery around that time. But I think somewhere or other I've inherited a gold disc from Genesis somewhere in the house. But I think the interesting stuff is this stuff with AC/DC, where I kind of got to know them quite well, I suppose, in the 90s, around Donington time. Yeah. And then that period, I'm closing my ticket thing because it's chaos here. They got asked to play in Moscow when there was the Berlin Wall fell in '89, and then if you remember, there was that attempted coup when Gorbachev was deposed. And Yeltsin held the White House, and anyway, so the story goes that they asked the young people who stormed the barricades and said no, what they'd want as a reward. They said, we want AC/DC and Metallica to play. And anyway, they then agreed to play. And I was at MTV by then. And I was asked to go with Tabitha Soren, a presenter from MTV America, to Moscow to cover this monumental event.
God, that was a huge deal because there virtually no groups had played in Russia at that point.
No.
We played Beatles.
It was all very tame, and this was free. And they weren't. Bon Jovi played a few years. It only started to open up at the end of the 80s a little bit. Yeah. But this was a free gig. I mean, something like 2 million people turned up. It was one of the scariest things I've ever done because, it's just been there's been a military coup and it hadn't worked, but it's still not that stable there. And I arrived, the airport was chaos. In the end, I went through the diplomatic line with my MTV staff card, which is hilarious. And I got in and got through. And Tabitha didn't come. She had an earache. Although there was some stories in the press about
she had an earache. So she cried off an AC/DC concert with an earache. It's a good
I think she had an ear infection, flying. I don't know. But I was on my own. But I got adopted by the band pretty much. And, we're all holed up in a hotel. It was like the Big Brother house. But you were there with Metallica, Pantera, the Black Crowes, Patrick Woodruff, the famous lighting designer, was there.
Oh, right.
And we're all in the same hotel in this sort of siege mentality. And I've kept some stuff from that. I mean, I didn't take many pictures, but I went to Red Square with the Black Crowes for their photo. So this is where the coup was happening. There's a bit of sort of wreckage around the chaos of Moscow when I arrived.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's Red Square. But here's the Black Crowes pose. And I kept in touch with Chris Robinson after this for a while. We did bond in this experience. It was a sort of mad time. Chris, there we are with Russian soldiers. It's all very topical in a rather sad way.
Yes,
it is. That's fantastic. What an incredible thing to have done.
Yeah, it was lovely. And
I love the idea you were all in the same at the Big Brother Hotel. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and I was lucky that WTN, who are now APTN, they had a bureau out there. So I was embedded. They basically, and Svetlana, who was the fixer, her father was in TASS, the news aid. So he was quite connected. So her local knowledge would save me really because I didn't speak Russian, obviously, and it was a real, lifesaver. So that was amazing. Then when I got back, a week or two after I got back, I got sent this thing, which is a Levi jacket, and I'm still very proud of this. Embroidered on one of the sleeves, not the one I'm looking at. Here we are. Here we go. Everyone who worked on the show got one of these.
So wonderful.
Oh, what does it say? Moscow.
There we are. Can you read it away?
Moscow, September.
It's in 1991. Yeah.
AC/DC.
And it was a real experience, so much. And I met a lot of Russian kids out there, and actually some hitchhikers who came up from what was the Ukraine then. And I love being there. I went back with Steve Blaine, my colleague, that December to cover an indie music festival and meet a lot of Russian bands. And we did a bit about the culture of the smallest rock scene. And that's when I got these Russian dolls behind me.
I like this because there's clearly a hierarchy. They're in different sizes, and thus somebody has decided someone's more important than someone else.
Yeah, the market was just outside Moscow. It's freezing cold, and you could buy Russian dolls. To give you an example, most of them look like this, and obviously there we are, topical. And there's Yeltsin inside, and that's all well and good. But I found some chap who did Beatles ones, and so that's John.
So it's Beatles Russian dolls. Wow.
Yeah, and I haven't seen anything like it.
So it's presumably John, Paul, George, and Ringo in that order, is it? Is there a very strong Ringo in the middle? Yeah.
And Ringo, I mean, which is not really fair because I think now people realise what a great drummer he was.
Yes.
Yeah.
But inside here, this little guy here is the fans. There we are. I've dropped him now. But he's the fan. So inside Ringo is a fan. There's a fifth. And it's an unusual thing. Out of all the things I've got from these crazy years, this is one of my favourites because
it's lovely.
It's already hand painted by another Beatles fan.
Yeah.
You know, and it sort of takes me back to those days a little bit.
Yeah.
So you've been all over the world with bands and filming and so forth. What have been the occasions when you've thought, I'll remember this all my life, kind of thing? You know, I'm very fortunate to be here.
Well, I always feel like that.
There must be particular times.
I think probably Pink Floyd in '94. By that time, I was at MTV, just about to go to VH1, I think. But I took my summer holiday was spent working for Pink Floyd, basically, and they'd just done the Division Bell album, and I did an EPK for EMI, which is an electronic press kit for normal people, and it went well. And I knew David already a bit because he was out and about in London in the 80s when I was, and my flatmate knew his girlfriend, all that nonsense, and I'd met him through the Amnesty shows, so we had a good rapport, and that all went quite well. And I knew the history with Roger, you know, it's all kind of all that stuff. So I went out to San Bernardino Airfield in California to film rehearsals for that tour. And they needed an aircraft hangar because the stage was so big. Mark Fisher was there, you know, designing this.
Wonderful.
And actually, I was meant to go with a dear friend of all of ours, Robert Sandall, who I was at Sky News for a bit, and I dragged him up there at 8 o'clock in the morning to talk about the Beatles reunion or something, you know, and we became friends after that. But he was due to go, but he'd interviewed, I think for Q Magazine, he'd interviewed Dave back then maybe for Q Magazine, and David had told him something in confidence. Only Robert swears by it, he didn't know it was in confidence, and anyway, he's a journalist, so why would it be in confidence? But it was something to do with how much the other members of the band had played on the Division. It was one of the, you know, politics and all these old bands. So
I remember this.
I was going to go on this jolly with Robert, a dear old friend. He was going to do it for the Sunday Times, I think. And I was going to do it for EMI and Sony, who had them in America, moonlighting, basically, for my day job. And then Robert wasn't there, and I arrived there, and I remember talking to, it was Jane Sen, who was the tour person, saying, okay, what time's the interview? So we haven't asked them, we thought you'd do that. So I had to kind of, you know, they were busy rehearsing, and then they just wanted to go out to the hotel.
Thrown in the deep end.
Strong arm them, but, you know, they're very nice people, all of them, you know, Roger, David, Nick, and Richard. They're just lovely people. So they all played ball and everything. And I sat there for a few days, watching the rehearsals, filming a bit of that, hanging out with them. I remember talking to, before I'd interviewed Nick Mason, talking to him about, they had so many trucks, most of them probably from mine. I said, these trucks, he said, oh, it's all catering, you know, look at my waist. Which is, you know, summed up their attitude. And then they took a holiday for a week in Palm Springs before they started the tour in Miami. So they paid for me to stay at the Sunset Marquee for a week. I didn't stay with them in Palm Springs, you know, it's like we know, we don't hang out with them or anything like that. But I was at Sunset Marquee, which was again, you know, full of rock stars. So I had a great time there. Luke Morley from Thunder was on holiday there, and we're about the same age. Luke and I hung out a bit, and it was just a lovely trip, actually. Met up with, I think Wendy Laistu now manages Duran, but she's sharing a flat with Cheryl Crow. You know, it was like a sort of almost famous, but I was a bit older, you know, living this. And then flew to Miami, where I stayed with the crew actually near the venue, which was nice because I got to sort of see the background, saw them build the stage and everything. And then we filmed them again and had a satellite. In those days, there wasn't an internet, so we had to have satellite trucks. And it was just me. I had to do this edit. We had a deadline and everything. I was thinking, why now I'd have production managers and there'd be runners. It was just me, you know. I had to go and buy my own hot dog and I had an American editor. It was just me and him knocking out this stuff, and it poured with rain, delayed everything. The band weren't in a good mood because it was so wet. But it was wonderful, really, to work. You know, I first saw them on the Dark Side of the Moon tour where I was about 15 or something, at Wembley. I won't bother you with the ticket. They all look much the same, but I've got it somewhere. So to work with them and see them, and they were playing a lot of that old stuff, obviously, it was just a wonderful thing. And at that point, I hadn't been to America that much. So, it was a great experience. Even though Robert wasn't there, and some of my fondest memories of this crazy journey, when I ended up with Robert with the Stones in Rotterdam in 1990, or in Guitar Legends with Robert. Having Robert along was always great fun because he had a very good sense of humour, and he also
very good sense of humour.
Knew everybody.
Fine tasting wine. This is a Sunday Times critic, wasn't he? Mojo and Q, an old mutual friend of ours. Fantastic.
And like you guys ended up at VH1, where basically the deal where everybody we loved in the music industry kind of worked there, didn't they? It was
wonderful.
It was a great time for all of us. But yeah, so Pink Floyd and they came back, but they didn't tour for very long. And the nice part of that story is that we were going to do a Pink Floyd weekend. In those days, the MTV and VH1, we were doing weekends sponsored. Yeah. It was a Pink Floyd one. And we spoke to the band and said, who we've got these players, who would you like to interview? And David asked for Robert to do the interview, because I think he realised that their friendship was more important than the little spat they had. So and it was great.
I can't believe he told Robert Sandel who had played on the record and who hadn't, and then didn't expect it to be written about. That's extraordinary, really, isn't it?
Yeah, Robert was quite put out by it, I think.
Yes.
He thought it was sort of a bit absurd, but there's complicated politics in that band, and I think an illustration of this is and it's public domain. No, not because I haven't got it yet, but Roger Waters is very public. When they re-released Animals last year, it had been remixed in 2018 with a surround sound mix, and it hadn't come out. And it turned out it hadn't come out because the sleeve notes, which had been written new, everyone agreed they were true. And there's a lot about Roger's ideas in there. And it was, it's all, but whatever it was, David said, no, I don't want the sleeve notes on there. So, and Roger said, well, I want them on there because it says who did what.
Yeah.
And David did a lot of that as well, but I don't know what it was. But anyway, this on-pass, in the lockdown, I think they all relaxed a bit. And so Roger said, yeah, okay, put it out without the sleeve notes. And then he very publicly made a statement online saying, here are the sleeve notes, and put them out anyway, separate to the album.
There's no greater tension than that between. No, I can remember we published it was a Robert Sandel article in Word magazine, and he described Roger Waters as a human tsunami, and Roger Waters rang me up in the office. Actually, rang me up to sound off about it, and I managed to kind of calm him down, and eventually just turned it around and said, well, why don't I interview you? And I interviewed him a day later, we put it on the cover of Word. I think the biggest selling issue we ever had. So there you are.
Interesting. There are people who navigate. Well, I've navigated a bit. I did the start of the World Tour. I went out to America to do the rehearsals for that as well, and did the start in Canada. But John Carrin, the keyboard player, plays in David's band and plays in Roger's band. And when they were rehearsing at Bray Studios, they had to do it near each other so that John could run across from one rehearsal. Yeah. So there is a sort of detente, I suppose. And, when somebody has old Pink Floyd, pre the 87 period, Roger still has a say over all that. And they have to get together to discuss all that. But it's complicated, I think.
Very complicated.
It's unbelievably complicated.
What else have you got to show us?
Yeah. Well, some interesting stuff. It's a bit geeky, but the import days.
Go on.
There were some interesting that came up. So this is my copy of Wish You Were Here.
Right.
Which was an American one, and you can tell that because it's on Columbia, which it didn't have the stickers on it for some reason.
No, well, obviously an American copy that hadn't been coming to the UK. Go on.
Yeah, I think I might have had a word with the person. I think I got this at Bonaparte Records in Croydon, where I also worked later. But and if you look at the man there standing up, right, he's quite upright, isn't
he? Yeah.
Well, when it came out everywhere else in the world, it looked more like that, where he's falling forward.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, at the time, I thought, that's interesting. That's the thing. I've never asked them about it. And today I thought, well, no, I'm sure people know what that's about now. No one does. It's just like this was taken on a different format camera, according to Stormthorpe, and this was on a 35mm. But no one knows why they use different shots other than just for the fun of it.
The amazing thing about that record, though, and I think about this a lot, when that came out, hold up that LP again, Mike, the import copy. It was shrunk wrapped in black plastic, wasn't it? Absolutely all the way around.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you went and bought it, for whatever it was, £5 or something like that, possibly a little bit less, but it would have been premium priced, much prized. And they picked it up, and you felt this thing, and it had a sticker on it, a little circular sticker saying Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here, didn't it? The pink and blue sticker in the middle. And the first thing you had to do was destroy that packaging to get at the record inside. There was no way you couldn't slip down the aperture, get the record out.
I think I tried that. It obviously didn't work because it's not here.
You couldn't do it, which I just think is absolutely astonishing. Because packaging was such an important part of what they did. But it was the theatre of going into a shop, buying it, and then destroying it, and then throwing away,
I think I kept the sticker, that bit with the sticker on, I probably have somewhere, But
don't you wish you had one you'd never opened? That would have
I can't imagine what one never opened would.
Yeah. Incredible.
And of course, the other thing is, hold up that picture again, Mike, is that, they, if you wanted to set a man on fire,
you actually had to physically set him on fire.
You had to set a man on fire.
Yeah, that was not digitally.
It was a stuntman.
Computer generated, was it?
There were two stuntmen. It was a Hollywood soundstage. It took them a few days to shoot it. You had to get one of the few stuntmen who could do, pyros or whatever they called it. It was comfortable setting himself on fire.
It's as extraordinary to think that a giant pig, an inflatable pig, flew over Battersea Passage. The idea that wasn't just sight-exed into the sky. It's absolutely amazing. Now it's really actually did do it.
And the part of the control is that Roger lays claim to the pig as well, and then
it was his idea apparently.
Yeah.
And it's when they used the pig on the 87 tour, their pig had to be different to that pig because
they're arguing about the pig.
Yeah,
they added some genitalia, didn't they?
Yeah.
I think it was.
This is what happens. They form in scout huts at the age of 16, and then 30 years later, they're arguing about custody of a pig.
Custody of an inflatable pig.
But they have moments. David played with Roger on the same tour that I did the little promo at the beginning. When he played the O2 for a number of nights, David came and performed the solo on Comfortably Numb. And that was a big deal because that was only 2010 or something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
And then Roger also, there was a charity gig that David did that Roger joined. They had a deal basically where they did. I think things are, I don't know whether that'll ever happen. Because Live 8 happened as well, of course, in 2005, which was, it wasn't abroad, but that's one of my great moments, being there for that. All these bands I saw in my teens, like when Led Zeppelin did the O2, which, being there was an important thing as well. So it's a nice line in your life, isn't it? Where you see them, and you look at them there, you realise you've grown older as well as them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So are you as the biggest Stones fan I know, are you happy with the Stones without Charlie Watts? No, obviously he's dead. Nothing you can do about that.
Do you still consider them the Stones? Dave and I have had great long debates about this. Are they still effectively the Stones with only, two members of the Stones left?
Well, Ronnie's been with them since 75. So.
Yeah, but he's still a new boy, isn't he? He's joined in 75, but we still think of him as the new boy. The cheeky little upstart who kind of got lucky,
I know, it's our generation, Pat. I think with Mick and Keith there, it's a bit, I think the Who are a good example, really, with Roger and Pete. They're still the Who, or the Two, as some people call them.
Yeah.
But I think it's up to them. I mean, that's how I feel with the Stones. It's up to them. It's not the same, though, and they would be the same. Charlie was the sort of backbeat of the band, and he was the heart of it, not just as a musician, but as a personality, and they would have no argument with that. And it's not the same. It's the same. They're saying it's the wrong, but it's not the same band at all. And you've worked with him in the past. As a character, he's not like the others. He's not like a normal rock star at all. He wasn't like a rock star. He's a different kind of character. Very interesting person. And the Stones would not have been the Rolling Stones without Charlie. And I think they understand that legacy.
But that's the great truth about all great bands, is that in the end, they wouldn't have been what they were without every single member. And you can say that about the Beatles, and you can say about Led Zeppelin, say about the band, anything like that. You know, we always say, oh, the lion's share is done by the songwriter. Well, it might be,
but the character is set.
Characters
and the atmosphere in the studio when they're recording it, and the way people contributed. You know, I think Get Back, the Peter Jackson film, gets that across more than anything. You realise how absolutely vital it was that they were all there to help arrange a song.
And Clint Johns, by the way, what a star of that film he turned out.
Well, God, with his hairy coats and his his frilly blouses, absolutely. I met him back in the 70s. I met him just by accident. Capital Radio put a shout out for people to come see the Who play for free. The Who with everyone alive back then. In Kilburn State, and I was in Surrey, so I got the train with my friend Rick up, and we arrived at Kilburn. There was no one there because it took us hours, obviously, from the middle of Surrey to get up to Kilburn. And then we thought we'd go around the back. If I'm honest, probably to try and sneak in, but to have a look. I don't know. And we were looking around the sort of trucks and stuff, and this guy in a big coat said, "What are you doing?" And we said, "Oh, we're just having a look." And he said, "Why aren't you in there?" And he said, "Well, they say it's full." He said, "It's not fucking full. Come with me." And so he led us through the stage door, across the stage. We walked past Keith's kit, dropped it to the front. There were only 50 people there. And the security said, "Do you know who that was?" And I said, "No." He said, "That's Glyn Johns." And it was Glyn Johns who got me. And I saw, and that, interestingly, that it was filmed for the kids all right, but Pete was in a terrible mood. So not much of it went in the film, although it eventually it did come out. Of course, nowadays everyone releases everything, but it came out as a show. I think you see the back of our heads, but there's nothing in there. But there's the moment I remember, and my friend Rick remembers it. He's so angry. At one point, he said, "Is there some fucking kid out there who can play guitar better than me? Come up!" And I, of course, got my friend's hand and poked it out. And fortunately for Rick, he didn't get asked up. Although he's a guitar player, he wasn't Pete Townsend. But it was such a memorable thing. And Rick and I thought, Rick works in the oil business now, lives in Cyprus. So we still talk about that. And I think my whole career has been, I've been a big fan. And somehow or other, because I'm a fan, I got a job at record shop, and I worked at Bonaparte for a bit as well, so record stores. And because I was a fan, I'm a fan who managed to jump over the fence and turn it into a job. And it was moments like that. I had a lot of moments like that where I just happened to be in the right place, meet the right people. And your career does rely on some good luck and some good people.
Yeah.
And also a bizarre thing for you that virtually every hero you probably ever had, you got to meet in the flesh, which is an extraordinary thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And
were there any of those particularly charismatic and undisappointing?
To be honest, it's rare they're disappointing. Sometimes, there's some ordinary stuff. I mean, I was working with Guns N' Roses. I think it was MTV. I was in Prague, and I was quite interested to have a look around. I've never been to Prague before. It's fascinating to see with the bridge and the clock and everything. And no one in my MTV was interested. And I got to Bill from Faith No More there because they were supporting. He was also, so I'd never really met Bill before, but he and I went on a tourist trip around Prague together. And it's those sort of weird moments. It's not particularly rock and roll. And then I went to Finland to interview them with Vanessa or Headbangers Ball, and I had dinner with his friend. He seems to be friends with everyone around the world. So I could have had to, and now because of Facebook, we're friends again. So that kind of experience where you find out something different about.
Yeah, people. Really interesting.
And then later, Genesis, I did a little documentary for every album they've ever done. I mean, that's a lot of work. 16 albums. I interviewed all of them, including Peter and the original guitar players and everything. And I went out to Chicago to do the interviews for the Peter Gabriel era, when they reunited the last time. And I got a call saying, Tony Banks is going on a architectural river cruise with the family tomorrow. I just wondered whether you'd like to tag along. So I went with Tony and his wife and daughter. We went around looking at we went on a cruise into the lake and everything in Chicago, looking at all the buildings. because he's very fascinated by it. That was another thing. I
love that idea that the 14-year-old you, the Genesis fan, would have no idea that one stage in the distant future you'd be going on an architectural river cruise with a member of the group. That's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, they do. I mean, there are rock and roll things where, it just sounds mad, but I documented the Voodoo Lounge recording sessions with the Stones in the mid-90s in Dublin. And that was my peak. I mean, I did help them out with the Charlie Watso bit, actually, but I hadn't really worked with them for a while. But back then I was doing a lot with them. And I went out to see their show in LA, and I got invited to their party, and their party was just ridiculous. It was like something out of a movie. It was the Nancy Berry era of Virgin.
Yeah.
And so there was money just thrown everywhere, champagne, naked girls on pianos. I'm sure I didn't dream that. But the guys I went with, Jed Lieber, who's a great pal out there, he left because if you're in LA, you probably go to parties like that the whole time. For me, it was like I was a party with the Rolling Stones and REM and Guns N' Roses there. Anyway, I got left there at this party. I was really jet lagged and really tired. To kind of really long story, I ended up going to another party with Slash and Matt Sorum, the drummer, and Slash driving this 4x4. And I was so tired, and the whole night was so ridiculous. Slash took me back to my hotel, and he said, "You're so out of it, man. I'm going to make sure you get back to the hotel." And I got dropped off at the hotel by Slash from going.
So
Slash tells you're so out of it.
Yeah.
then you've really have to calibrate that quite seriously, don't you?
But so Slash is your designated driver for the evening. That's fantastic.
And this was about 5 a.m, and I got back to the hotel, and they said, "Oh, Mr. Kaufman, your friends are in the jacuzzi in the hot tub." And I said, "Who?" And it was a girl called Pumpkin Pie, who's a well-known girl in LA, and I'd met at the party briefly, and she was there with Bernard Fowler and a few other people who's a back with the same, and they'd used my name to go and hang out at the song. They didn't spend any money on my calendar, but they used my name to go and hang out at the swimming pool all night drinking. So my reputation went up a huge amount at that point of madness, but I couldn't keep that up. To be in a rock band properly like Guns N' Roses, you need to do that at least 4 or 5 times a week. And
you've got to know somebody called Pumpkin Pie, haven't you? Really?
Yes,
essential. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't Googled the name, but there's more on her than I know. But it was a very, that was a different side of it. So it wasn't all, sort of trips around Prague and architectural cruising.
Mike, we traditionally finish these chats by asking people to tell us what is the greatest record ever made. Do you know the answer to that question?
Well, obviously no, because no one does. But thank you very much. No, but I think that there's an argument for one, which I'll get. Hang on.
All right,
good.
Reveal.
No, you're allowed to. Of course, everybody's opinion of this question.
Well, the original cover, I think, before it was the reason it's the original cover, I hope we won't get sued for putting it on YouTube.
It's got Lucille Ball on it, has it?
Yeah, and all the other people who grumbled. And then they put strips, it was covered up, wasn't it, in the end?
Yeah,
I've still got an original, I think. Surely.
Yeah, it was out for a while. Anyone who bought it originally had it, I think.
Yeah.
And it went 4 times platinum in America, so it's hardly an obscure collector's piece.
No.
But I think the argument there is you've got to remember that period. And I, punk was happening, and I would, I'd go and see the Buzzcocks one week at the Croydon Greyhound, the next week I'd go and see Steve Hillage. So I never fully subscribed to the punk thing, but I enjoyed it and I was into it. And at the same time, disco was a thing, which, I also kind of got into. I was sort of paid homage to that. And this is my copy of Rapper's Delight, the original Rapper's Delight.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
Oh, right.
But I had quite broad tastes. And I think Mick Jagger is like a sponge in that regard, that he saw what was going on. He was listening to this punk stuff. He was listening to disco, and some girls as a product of that a bit, where the danger of the Stones at that point, you and I went to see them, but what was going to happen in 77, 78, no one knew, because it was all changing.
Yeah.
Dance, music, everything. And the Stones somehow hit the zeitgeist with album. They had Miss You on there, Respectable. Yeah, and it was energized. I think Ronnie Wood was a full member by then as well. Black and Blue did. And it's got a great energy to it. Now, you look at the track listing now with Beast of Bird and everything else on it. Far Away Eyes was a bit cheesy, but it's beautiful. Beast of Bird, and one of the best ballads. Before they Be Run, which is Keith's theme song, really.
Yeah.
And you know, they imagine, just my imagination, they always have a cover, don't they? But I think it's just a great summary of the Rolling Stones, and it shows how adaptable they were. And at the time, I don't think it was celebrated. Exile and all those albums, but I think that now it's probably celebrated.
It's a brilliant record. It's a brilliant record. And they were so right to incorporate a bit of disco in at the time. You know, it was
I Miss You. Which here we go.
Which the old die-hard greatcoat wearing Stones fans
Just to
rather
prove that I'm a proper. Stones
Oh yeah,
fan. I kept my 12-inch Pink Floyd.
That's great.
Which has got a sax solo. No, it hasn't got the sax solo on it. It's got the harmonicas solo on it instead of the sax solo. It's a different mix, so it makes it a bit more interesting.
Oh wow! Didn't know
Fantastic.
that. Didn't know that.
So Mike, I mentioned at the top about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame committee. How does that work, and who's on it? Is that? I mean, is that all done on Zoom now, or how does that work?
Sadly, yes. And I can't say too much because it is a bit like Fight Club, and people get told off for talking too much about it. But a lot of it's public domain now. But the list of people is published, and it's great. It's people like Bill Flanagan, David Frick, but also Tom Morello and Dave Grohl and people like that. And so when I was asked whether I was interested in joining, of course I said yes. And it was for many years at the boardroom of the Rolling Stone magazine in New York. And you sit around a table, you'd have to bring two artists that were been going for 25 years, and you'd advocate for them, sit around the table. And people were very passionate about it, obviously. And there are people they want to get in. I can't say really who voted for who and who did what, and then you vote within the group, and then you come up with a list of 15 that then goes out to a broader voting panel of about 1,200. And then that's whittled down to 6 or 7 who go into the Hall of Fame. So in America, it's a really big deal. And, they think it's some sort of, I don't know, underground cabal where we all kind of plot, and Jan Wenner threatens us all if we don't put in, I don't know, one of his favorite bands. It's not really like that, but it is very passionate. And you've got a lot of people, not dissimilar to you guys, who are really passionate about music and really believe that the artist they talk about needs to be in. And it's, for me, a bit like this conversation, it's a great thing, having grown up with it and bought it and gone to all the gigs. Yeah. And I'm the only British person there, by the way. I'm
going to say, yeah.
So it was a really good combination. One year they had Depeche Mode and the Zombies, I think. I like those combinations. And really quite recent ones seem recent to be Jay-Z and Eminem have all been inducted, haven't they? So...
And the interesting thing is they do try and get these bands to be nice and play together. I mean, famously, Creedence Clearwater Revival, they didn't play together. Blondie doing the speech, the old members.
Oh, I've seen that clip.
How we play, and Deep Purple, they were having none of it. And Kiss didn't work out. But then Hearts, and there's a book, the two girls were in the book, and that was a mess, with the original member of Heart, the pre-video age. But they got back together for a song or two, and it was amazing, And when you see that, same with Bon Jovi, Richie came back, and Roxy Music. Brian Eno didn't play, and actually Tony Thompson wasn't around because he's reunited with them now. But Eddie Jobson came back and did the violin solo, and it was just,
that's brilliant.
Something special about it. It's worth being part of it, just so I get to go to the gig. Really,
absolutely, what fun!
So, do you get your way? I mean, have you?
Is there anyone you were particularly pleased got in there, and you felt that you were a big part of making it happen?
There's somewhere because it's about telling a story, isn't it? And there's this beautiful museum in Cleveland, same architect as the Pyramid at the Louvre. It's beautiful. It's a bit like the Bowie L. Stones exhibition. But it's much broader. I remember reading the Paul Simon lyrics when I was there. There's all that stuff, which is great for people like us. And you want the story to be complete. So there's people like Peter Gabriel, I thought was an interesting artist outside Genesis. So he's already in for Genesis, but I thought as a solo, so I was very pleased when he got in.
Right.
And then as far as the story goes, I mean, I think it's really, someone like Eminem this year is great because he's so important, and he's right he went in his first year. Someone like Joan Baez, because she's not, it's not, I know it's only rock and roll, Stones say, but there's more to it. There's a protest element of rock and roll. She embodied that.
Yeah, completely.
Her relation with Bob, she's very much rock and roll. So when she went in, I was pleased. But I'm pleased this year. It's good when the British bands get in. And I love Deep Purple finally getting in. And this year, Judas Priest finally getting in. But I think the next generation, like Depeche Mode, and then this year, the Eurythmics and Duran Duran are getting in. And they've just announced they're reunited with Andy Taylor, their guitar player. And I think it's great when it's an excuse.
That's really good. That's an event.
And I think with Roxy touring, it's their 50th year, they're touring. Whether that would have happened without the reunion of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I don't know. You know, it does get.
Yeah, I think it provides a bit of impetus for them, because I always get the feeling with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that it's their families who want them to be in it. Don't it?
Yeah.
It sort of proves that you were important.
Yeah.
Even though everybody's forgotten
to show
about
your
it.
grandchildren.
Yes, it is.
Well, it's funny because sometimes I'm on a table with people I know, and sometimes, you know, I'm just filling in on a table because I just go along and I don't always know that. And I was on this fascinating table with some members of Chicago's family, and I sat next to Kurt Cobain's sister.
Amazing.
Who I didn't realise who she was because she didn't offer it, and I didn't pry too much until she walked up on stage, and she was. You know, she was very entertaining company, but we didn't discuss the environment or anything. And I didn't see her again. So it's a great event to be part of. And it's an important thing. I think we don't have something here. Malcolm Gary and his team, they did a UK Hall of Fame for a while, which is more of a TV show. This is a Hall of Fame that's actually a museum. And the TV show, well, there's an argument with it, what's secondary, but because it's on HBO and it's a big deal. There is a place, there is a Hall of Fame, you know, you can go to it. And I love the fact it's so eclectic now that it does represent everything. Dolly Parton is now happy to be in this year.
Is she? I thought she'd politely decline.
We thought she said she wasn't going to do it. That's right. No, it's a very clever thing to do. And say she wasn't rock and roll.
No. And then of course a lot of people didn't vote for her. And then the week before the votes were final, she said, "Actually, I've rethought this, and actually I will accept." And I don't think I'm particularly rock and roll, but I understand the reason. I'll be very gracious and I'll accept. So,
right.
And fortunately, enough people voted for her that she did get in. So she's in and she's very happy about it.
Very good.
In fact, this year, I think everyone's happy. You know, sometimes Axl Rose didn't show up and I think Roger Waters, I don't think he went. And you know, there's years, and Steve Miller went and then slagged everybody off. There's years where
there's always a bit of that.
Year,
there's always
everybody is keen.
Try Patti Smith and see how you get on.
Wasn't there it was particularly colourful evening with Blondie, I think, because there were more members of Blondie. There were extra members wanted to be part of it.
Well, there's two members came up, Frank Infant or something. I can't remember who it was now. They came up and sort of said, "Can we play?" And Debbie Harry has to say, "No."
Yeah.
They actually ask if they can come up and play on stage, thinking they were so embarrassed they have to say yes. Oh, it's agonising, actually.
Deep Purple as well, because David Coverdale was there and he didn't play. He would have gone up for a tune if he'd been asked. But Deep Purple, the current band, didn't want to do that, whereas Heart did that. Although I wasn't that involved in the 90s, in 95 I did work on the Led Zeppelin piece for the TV, and I went out because I produced that. I went out to see the show, and they got, you know, even they were touring as Page and Plant, and John Paul Jones' speech, started his speech with, "I'm glad my friends finally remembered my phone number."
I remember my phone number. That's what I know. It's heartbreaking.
So, but they played together, you know, so and that was quite special. And then jammed with Neil Young. I mean, these are moments that, you know, when my teenage self would dream about.
Absolutely.
Really. Well, look, Mike, thanks very much.
That's been a lot of fun.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.